Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, is it December the 17th, in Victoria, BC. I'd like to thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this happen. Our first guest in this segment is Norm Ryder, and Walter and I are both going to do the interview. And we're going to be talking about something we all hear the name of but don't really know much about, called Worksafe BC. And Norm, maybe you can start off by just telling us what happened in your case.
Well, what happened was in 1972, I was doing a survey project for the provincial government near Kelowna, and I got hit with a very large dose of microwave radiation from the piece of survey equipment that I was working with. It was to measure long distances. When I passed in front of the beam, I felt a warming on the side of my face, and it bothered me for a couple of days, and the warming sensation went away. No one paid much attention to it. And apart from the interesting experience, I ignored it until, well, actually a few years ago, I had a acoustic neuroma tumor, which is one of the tumors that they recognize as being caused by microwave radiation. I had that removed in 2001, and that pretty much crippled me out from then on. Can't hear in one ear and various other problems. Had it removed a second time. It's a benign tumor, but I had it removed a second time in 2010, and it's finally I drew the connection between the microwave radiation, the side of my face, and the whole thing, and made a claim to Worksafe BC. When I made the claim with them, there's all these very neat little rules that they say they follow, but they don't follow the rules and refuse to accept the evidence on file and use that as a justification to deny the claim. Now, once I got into it, the whole thing, I realized that that's a standard practice of Worksafe BC to not accept the facts in the file, rule against the person. One woman I know spent thousands of dollars to get on a lawyer to get her claim looked at properly. Then just recently her husband is going through a similar situation where I just found out today that the case manager phoned up the medical specialist and told the medical specialist not to look at certain things that were caused by the accident. And it just keeps going on. Another person this morning also, when he heard I was coming in, told me a similar story. And then he topped it off afterwards by saying that he had a bad experience as an employee, and as an employer, he doesn't think they're looking after him any better. So you begin to wonder, who is Worksafe BC working for? They're not working for the employees. They don't seem to be working for the employers. And on top of that, the CEO gets over $500,000, or almost $500,000 a year in salary. The other senior executives do well. And their total above their projected liabilities, putting money aside for that, they made $800 million this year.
Can you explain how they didn't look after you in your case, which again you say was caused when you happened to walk through the beam of just a microwave beam being used in a piece of survey equipment?
Well, at the time, no one thought it was much of an issue, but it was only when I drew things together, and I had to do a lot of research. The equipment is no longer used, partly, I think, because they know that it's dangerous. 10 years later, they were telling people to stay 25 feet away from it. I passed within inches of it. I got the specs on the machine or the equipment, worked out how much radiation I got hit, which is 3 times more than the Worksafe BC regulations say is acceptable. But the medical advisor looking at the case decided to use another number that was just a preliminary estimate of what was involved, and refuses to go back and say, oh, made a mistake, I looked at the wrong number.
Is that what he just looked at the wrong number?
Essentially, the difference is I was hit with 31 watts per square meter, and the number he's using is 4.8 watts per square meter. Now that probably those numbers don't mean anything to anyone, but that is 31 is approximately 100 times what a cell phone gives off. So it's significantly different. And I finally was able to prove to Worksafe that the doctor did not look at the right numbers, so they opened a new file for me. But they can't make a decision on the new file because they made a ruling on the old file and they can't change their mind. Doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when they have a regulation that says that if they find a person that made a claim, gave incorrect information, they can reopen the claim and take the benefits away from the person. Well, this is exactly the same thing, only headed the other direction. Apparently there's regulations that they can only do this one way. They can't turn things around. And because of that whole experience, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this, is I would like people that are finding they are not being treated fairly by Worksafe and their Worksafe is not following the rules to contact me. It's about time the people started going back to Worksafe, that it's not doing its job properly.
You know, I've been on with Worksafe BC with workers' compensation as an employer. I've been, dealing with them all my life, and I was quite astonished when you said today that they had collected $800 million more than what was necessary to administrate the program and to pay out the claims this year. So you can imagine the amount of money that these guys have in their kitty someplace, and my first reaction is, hey, I'm paying those guys every month.
Well,
why don't they?
To be fair, that part of that profit is profit on their invested income.
Yeah.
But if they're playing with that type of money, you shouldn't be paying the premiums you have to pay.
One would think. I mean,
or they should look after the workers.
Yeah, and what are they? Are they investment managers, or are they, are they actually looking out at the health and welfare of workers in this province? And it just doesn't appear that they are. I think they're much more inclined to have this investment thing going. And as you say, the CEO is making $500,000 a year. They're all doing quite well, thank you.
So you don't like contributing to the Worksafe BC Investment Club?
Pretty well. I mean, this is happening all across Canada.
Well, this is it. I mean, I met somebody else that had experience in Ontario and Alberta that almost matched exactly what I was talking about. And that was this morning. It seems every time I turn around, there's somebody else that has almost the exact same story.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the worker side of it. You say from the employer side, you're beginning to wonder about the premiums you're paying. Who are they working for?
Well, I came across a story like this many, many years ago of somebody whose life had just been ruined. And from that point on, I had the impression it was called, it was Workers' Compensation Board then, but that they're definitely not working for people who are injured. I think if somebody's at work and they get a broken leg and you got to be off work for 2 months, they'll probably treat you like a king and give you everything you need. But if people get seriously injured at work and require long-term support, then they don't seem to want to talk to you. And they'll just cut you off. And I mean, that's my impression of how it works.
Well, actually, we were talking about it this morning, and it seems that, if you break a leg, they're good about it. But soft tissue injuries, they have a real problem dealing with that. They will find any excuse to not deal with the issue.
Can lawyers help?
I wish they could. Most lawyers, if you go to them and talk to them about a Worksafe BC case, they don't talk to you, they run and hide. A few of them will tell you, oh, Worksafe BC doesn't work to the normal rules of the legal system. None of them will take the case on contingency. So the only way that friend of mine won was because she was able to afford to put thousands of dollars up. to do it. That the lawyers know that even if you've got a good solid case, they don't have a reasonable probability of getting paid. I don't blame them for not taking the case, but it leaves the poor worker out in the cold that every time you take it to the various appeal levels at Worksafe BC, their people throw in more and more confusing pieces of information that make no sense whatsoever. They just make these up, and then you've got to argue against that in the next round. But because you hadn't argued it against it before they had made that fact up, that proves their fact is correct.
Yeah, up in the interior when those two sawmills blew up, there's lots of reports from all sorts going to Worksafe BC that these were very dangerous mills. They didn't move in to shut down the mill or to clean those mills up and enforce regulations, which they should have been doing. And then on the other hand, when people do get injured, they deny their claims. So, it's quite obvious that it isn't fair. I mean, we know they should be getting out there and doing their job better and making sure our workers don't get injured. But the enforcement is just not there.
And again, you were injured walking through the beam of a surveying.
I passed within 4 inches of it, and this is really critical in microwave radiation, that anywhere in what they call the near or intermediate field, you can get serious spikes of radiation. If you get further out, in my case, that was 6 meters away. I was never 6 meters away from the unit. Then you get into what they call the far field, and that's where that standard inverse square law applies. If you look at something like a cell tower transmission,
the further away you get, it drops off very quickly.
Yeah, then everyone knows that rule. Cell towers, there's reports of some of them you have to be 240 meters away from them before you're out of the intermediate field zone where these spikes of up to 100 times can hit you.
Yeah.
But you say here that they have denied me due process. You say it's comparable to being wrongfully convicted based on information known to be false?
Well, that's quite correct. That what I would have thought that any government process would give you due process and look at the facts when they made a decision. In this case, they literally created their own information and then ruled against me on the information that they created that has nothing to do with the facts. And
then they admitted the mistake, but the second case can't go ahead because they ruled against you in the first case when they were using wrong information. Is that about it?
That pretty much summarizes that. I'm trying to get a meeting with the Minister of Labor on this. Lots of luck on that.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, someone's got to look at this process. It's not working. The whole process is broken.
Well, I would say it is working, because I think what it's doing is exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be screwing the workers and not protecting them.
Well, obviously, denying Norm's claims is, improving the bottom line in the investment fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that sense, it is working perfectly.
Yeah.
I agree. Except that's not what they tell me Worksafe BC is there for.
Have you ever talked to your local MLA about this issue?
I have, and they keep saying we have to follow the process. Well, I keep trying to explain to them the process is broken.
That's right.
That somewhere along the line, something's got to be done to reset the process.
So it is a legislated body, and they should be able to change through legislation how they operate, don't you think?
Right now, they've got legislation that really protects the worker, that if I was working for you, I hurt myself, I have no option. I have to go through Worksafe BC. I can't sue you even if you really earned it.
Yeah.
And the whole process is designed to push the worker right out of the whole process. But as I say, part of the problem comes in that, okay, so you push the worker out, why are you charging the employer such hefty premiums? And I don't know what the premium for you is, but it's a big check every month you've got to write off.
Well, it's quite interesting because been very lucky in this department in our job, and but on one occasion there was a concern where it was a small injury. The worker didn't even want to get it looked at. I insisted on it, and when he was getting patched up, they asked if it happened at work, and he said yes. And my rates doubled, even though we did not make, there was no claims made. The worker came back to work the same day. I know nothing about it until I saw the bill. And they doubled my rates. And I had to pay them. There was no way out. Mm-hmm. There was no claim made. So that was such a frustrating thing to experience. And I had my taste of how they operate. And it was really quite shocking. You know, I did realize, and I thought, yeah, it is true. The way it is set up, if a worker is injured, the employer is quite well protected from being sued, no matter how negligent they are. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking that in itself is not right either, if they're really negligent. And I find a lot of times companies can really cover up how they're doing business. It's very hard for a worker to prove that the company was, negligent to the point where it would be a criminal code issue or something like that.
Well, I think those sawmill issues you brought up are a good example that Worksafe got in there and, I guess you could say, interfered with the investigation enough that they couldn't lay charges.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I'm going to jump in right here. We only have 2 minutes left. Yeah. So, Norm, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about how to rebuild the system or fix it up.
Well, their safety prevention area, I think, actually almost works, but they should be separating the compensation, that whole section off under an independent oversight body. They do have what they call one, but it's not really WCAT, is an organization of the provincial government, but the Worksafe BC advertises for employees to work for and make decisions at WCAT, so they're obviously not a hand's length from Worksafe BC. So that whole thing has to be looked at in proper oversight. It should actually go to similar to a court system where you truly have an independent judge and you have the right to actually cross-examine them properly in front of a totally unbiased position. That anything less than that, the worker is not getting a fair shake. I shouldn't have had to fight this battle for 4 years with Worksafe and still be nowhere.
Yeah. Norm, thank you very much. And Walter, thank you. I think exactly what you said at the end is the system is not fair, it's not just. It has to be like a court system where both sides have some power to get to hopefully an honest answer, and even that's filled with problems. But yeah, it's a mess, folks. Worksafe BC. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.